und sie wird da einen Einblick gewähren, wie funktioniert das, wie wird das genutzt, welche Philosophie steckt dahinter. Und Sie werden alle feststellen, das ist eine relativ einfache Sache, mit aber durchaus interessanten Schlussfolgerungen und mit durchaus interessanten Handlungsmöglichkeiten. Welcome.
Hello? Testing? Oh, maybe I'll put it higher up. Yeah, you can hear it fine? Okay. So it's great to speak just before lunch when everyone's really tired and want to go to the toilet, get another coffee or whatever. So first of all, thank you very much for the invitation to be here. It's very nice to see so many people from HR. So my name is Rebecca. I'm one of the co-founders at Celpax. And today I'll be talking about employee morale and why measure daily, which for many people sounds a bit crazy because I have tons of things to do. Why do I want to measure daily? At Celpax, we believe that a great workplace is everyone's job, and we help people get to that point of having a better workplace by using simplicity. So if your employee morale is low, what can you do? And if you do something, how do you know it's working? Back in 2013, we had a large corporation that announced some news in their compensation plan. This company used to be around 65% of their employees would say that they had a good day at work, they liked their company. And on the day when they introduced the news and told everyone what was happening, we could see that the employee morale plummeted. It sank like a rock. And over the next couple of weeks, we could see that the trend line kept going down, down, and down, until the point where it came to 7% of people would say that they had a good day. So that's when we called them up and say, hey, do you need help? Well, what's happening? What's your plan? And the HR said, yeah, no, we have a plan. Our CEO is going to do a big roadshow. And on that roadshow, our office is going to be one of the stops. And I remember thinking, well, that's very good, you know, to see the CEO talk, etc. But I also remember thinking, but hang on, if we're in January and this happens in April, what's going to happen until then? What are you going to do until then? Because if you look around and 93% of your people are not happy at work, how does that impact your productivity? So I'm not saying don't do the roadshow, but what can you do meanwhile? What small steps can you take? So the reason we know how the employee morale was going down is with our device that we measure. We call it the Celpax. So I would like you to do a little experiment. I don't have the fancy tools. I was thinking of good old putting up your hands. So I want you to do some time travel and go back to yesterday. So you're at work. It's time to go home. So you grab your jacket and your bag, and then you walk towards the exit door. So you've been at work for the last 8 hours, and you come to the door, and there's a device, and it's asking you, how was your day? And there's a green smiley button, and there's a red, not so smiley button. So of you here, leaving work yesterday, hands up, how many of you would have said that you had a good day at work and would have pressed the green button? Or if you're a student, if you had a good day at the university. So this is one example of how you can measure the sentiment of your people. So just a few things. After years of experience, I wanted to mention a few things that I know that some of you are just going to be completely thinking about during the whole presentation if I don't clarify this. So the first thing is that it's voluntary. You can't force people to tell you how they feel at work. The second one is that you're anonymous. This is simple tech. We don't measure your fingertip. There's no hidden camera to find out who is pressing what. We detect if there's multiple pulses, so if someone presses twice, which is a very interesting metric in itself. You press at the end of the day, so the question is, how was your day? Wie war dein Tag? And you press green or red. I'll be coming back to why we designed it that way later on as well. And there's a bit of gamification, which is that you don't see the results from the others until after press. So you have to participate if you want to see how the rest of your team are feeling. So today I thought we would go through 3 things to understand a bit more about why measure daily, which is a baseline. So what's normal or abnormal in your company? We'll be talking about finding a rhythm, improving regularly instead of the big yearly projects, and also the business impact. So how can we translate this into money? So the first reason of why measuring daily is related to the baseline. Because what's normal in your company is probably going to be quite different from the person that is sitting to your left or to your right. So let's make the assumption that in your company, 7 out of 10 would press the green button. 3 out of 10 would obviously press red. We base our numbers on the last 30 days. So since you're using the same question every day, that means that you get a baseline. So every day you're asking, how was your day? How was your day? How was your day? How was your day? That means that you can see trends, and you can also see the day impact. So you can see if you have a stressful project, you can see the toll that it's taken on your people. Or if you do safety breakfast, you can see how do those impact the mood of your people. So of course there are many other methods to measure and to get feedback. You could ask, for example, okay, do you like your manager? Did you like today's training, etc.? The power of using the same question is that you get normalized data. So if you do an activity, is it enough to impact the day? And if something happens, is the reaction from your people strong enough to move the baseline? There was a Swedish company, just when we had started, they were normally around 80% green. And one week we could see that they were trending up. So they were getting days with 95 and even 100% green. So we called up and asked what they were doing. And we said, well, whatever you're doing, it seems to be working. And HR said, no, we're not doing anything special, but let me ask and see if there's something happening. So what she did was to go out in the organization, ask, and it turns out that the employees had organized a ping pong tournament themselves. So every break, they were there playing, and the day of the final was when they got 100% green. Other things that you can see is all-hands meeting, for example. So when you grab all your employees and get together in a room like this, what's the impact? Will it move your baseline? If you normally get 70, what's the impact of your meeting? Is it energizing, or do people go out feeling, oof, none of those more? It's also quite common to see the impact of payday, more so in factory blue-collar environment. It's very, very clear as well, if your bank messes something up and you pay 2-3 days late, you will see red in this kind of environment. We don't see that in office environment. Maybe we overpay our office workers, don't know. But we can also see the effect of parties, which is no matter which, if it's blue collar or white collar, you will see normally a positive impact. But there's also the other side of it, when you organize a party which people perhaps don't like. One HR, she said, Rebecca, our device is broken. And I said, oh, how did it break? And she said, no, yesterday we organized a party. It was a really nice party, but I'm seeing red. So I said, well, tell me a bit more about the party. And it turns out that in a call center environment, where you don't specifically make a lot of money, they organize the party after hours. But you still have to go, but you didn't get paid. So maybe I prefer to go to my yoga after work, or maybe I prefer to pick up my kid at school. These things have an impact. In other companies, they've noticed that they have one day which is where people don't feel so good. So in this company, for example, on Thursdays, 7%, they have a 7% lower results. So what happens on Thursdays? Is that when you have your weekly meeting, for example? Another thing people notice is the production incidents. So sometimes they can verify that in the morning shift last Tuesday, a machine broke down, because you can see that it had a big impact on the employee morale. So that's a very common thing that makes people press red as well. the actual machine that you're using, for example. If it keeps breaking down, that pisses people off. And then, of course, you can also compare with an index. So how is your company, how is your baseline doing compared to the German index or your industry index or the Leipzig index, for example? We don't have a Leipzig index yet. Another advantage of the baseline is what this HR from Nissan is saying. So it's not the same to send a survey on a Monday or a Friday. There will be biases. So if in your company you know that Thursdays is when you're 7% lower, are you going to send your survey on that day? So then the question is, when do you send your survey? I'm pretty sure that very few people here would send their yearly survey or their trimester survey the week before Christmas, for example, or when things are really crazy in the office and everyone's running mad to finish a project, a deadline, etc. So most people tend to wait for a better moment because there's also certain pressure. Maybe you want a good result, or maybe you want an accurate result. Because the reality is that we feel different at work depending on what is happening. So how do people feel during the week of hell compared to normal weeks? How far down do you go? Some people, when they're interested in testing our device, they say, yeah, we're really interested, but we don't want to start now because the results wouldn't be accurate. And that's very interesting because then they're saying, well, you know, we're going through all these changes. We have management changes. We have a new manager coming in, etc. So the result wouldn't be accurate because there's a lot of things happening at the moment. But how can how I feel as an employee not be accurate? We had one company that started during the equivalent of the week of hell, but it was the month of hell. They were going through big problems. They had to fire people. People were really, really concerned about their jobs, which is the main reason why you are at work, meaning that the only way that you can go is kind of up. So when they did start go up, because they wanted a new client, etc., you could see the exact moment when they communicated that the jobs were saved, etc., and you can also see how long it took them to get back to a normal baseline compared to other companies. So I wanted to give you an example of the power of a baseline. This is a German company, but it's in their Bratislava office. And this company they were going through a hard time as well. So one guy started preparing one day spontaneously waffles for his colleagues. And they all sat down and they had breakfast together, and it was very nice. And they liked it so much that the CEO, they kind of decided to continue doing it. So every Friday they sit together, 2 or 3 volunteers, they do the waffles, they sit down to have breakfast together. And these are the results from the last 3 months of last year. What you're looking at is the results from Monday to Thursday, where more or less 50% of people would press the button. And then you see Fridays, where almost 60% of people press the green button. So then you can say, okay, well, one waffle event is nice, but what about the second one? Or what about the third or the fourth or the fifth time you sit down to have waffles? Do people still like it? Is it still effective? So what you're looking at here is the blue line is the Friday, and other weekdays is the red. And then you can also see the impact over time. And here you can also see that they're quickly going up. The mood is improving quite fast. But the CEO was to go out and talk to people and say, hey, I see our mood is very low. What's happening? If you give me feedback, I promise that we will act. And then there's probably people that were also thinking, but hang on, aren't people just happier because it's Friday? So is it the waffles that make the Friday better, or is it simply because it's Friday? So what you're looking at here is the European index for offices. And here you can see that there is a certain Friday effect. So then the question is, okay, so is it really worth doing the waffles? And here you can also see that the mood was trending down towards the end of the year for other European offices until December. So the next step was to look at take away all the other days. So we say goodbye to Monday to Thursday, and we only look at how Fridays impact the mood KPI. So this way you can analyze the gap between the data sets, and you can also see the evolution over time. So here you can see that the impact ranges from around 5 to 10%. So it seems to be working. And here we're looking at the equivalent for the European index baseline. And here you can see that the impact is between 0 to 4%. So a lot less. So the conclusion is that employee morale on Fridays in European offices, this is excluding factory settings, for example, is that the mood is 3% higher on Fridays, but at Avitech, we're talking 10% thanks to the Waffle Fridays. So then you can also think, well, why do waffles? Why do social events? The reason you do social events in this case is because it's an excellent time to talk to people, get to know them. What's happening? Why are we pressing more red? What can we do to fix it? What do you think? Meet people face to face and have real conversations about what's happening in your company. And of course, the same method can also be used for all-hands meeting, incidents, reports, etc., to track the impact of what is it that has the biggest impact on your people. The second reason has to do with continuous improvement, improving regularly, finding a rhythm, etc., agile, lean, which are interesting in itself. At Celpax, we're a social company, so we want more people to wake up and feel good about going to work, or at least feel okay about going to work. And being social is also one of the reasons why we sent the first one for free. And we're in 60 countries by now. So I would like you to do some time traveling again, and I want you to think about yesterday again. But this time I want you to think about your colleagues. So it's yesterday, it's time to go home. If they were lucky, they could leave early because it's Friday. And they also come to the door, and they're faced with the same questions. How was your day? Do you think that the majority of your coworkers, of your colleagues, would have pressed the green button, or would they have pressed the red button? So hands up all of those who think that the majority of your colleagues would have pressed green. Interesting. So if you're HR and people are unhappy at work, what can you do? If you only have 1 hour next week or per week to dedicate to improving your workplace, to how people are feeling, etc., what is the most effective thing that you can do? So when you're choosing between your activities, how do you know that they're worth the money, or how do you know what works, or how do you know if it's too little or too much? Maybe you should be doing something completely different. When it comes to what makes people press red, many people don't know why their colleagues are pressing red. And we see two trends. On one hand, you have the people like the CEO at Avitech, who go out, they talk, what's going on, give me some feedback. They see the result and they act. And then we have the other people that they ask us for more functionality. I need more features. I need more data. I need more reports. Our data shows that you can't replace face-to-face conversations completely. We connect with people. We don't connect the same through screens, for example. So we see a little bit also that some of the reports, when they ask for excessive reports, it's kind of a placebo effect, because you have all these reports, so it looks like you're doing something, but until you actually act on the results, then you're not going to be improving much. So when it comes to what does make people press red in workplaces, there's a Twitter chat called HR Hour, where a couple of weeks ago some users were discussing their experiences. And one guy said, I could see what part of the employee experience made my employees feel great or annoyed. And someone else is saying, oh, well, that's great that you can get feedback about strategy and policy. And what this guy said was, well, you'd be surprised at the amount of daily things that people bring up. So he mentioned one thing was, for example, with toilets. So if the toilet is broken and no one is fixing it and it's still blocked, days after day after day, it has an impact. And then another woman was also saying that they could track the impact by weather, by emails, by drinks, by breakfasts, etc. So if you want to talk strategy, policy, etc., you need to build up the trust. And it's also by fixing stuff that you show that you care. So this is the recipe that we recommend to users. We also shamelessly stole it from our users. This is how they improve. So they measure, talk, improve, and then repeat. And also when you're talking, many people use the neutral way of asking, which is what makes us press green, not what makes you press red. It's about us. Wisdom of the crowd, you can ask one person about how many other people are feeling. And also invite people to be part of the solution that they're implementing, because being asked to participate is engaging in itself. So if you do this enough time and you build up the trust with your employees, then you will get more honest feedback about what is really happening in the workplace. One example of small feedback that come up, for example, is in a large corporation in the UK where people were complaining, they were saying they were pressing red because in the elevator, the managers weren't saying hello in the morning. Which sounds like, well, why wouldn't you say hello? It's just, you meet someone in an elevator, just say hi. But they weren't doing it. There's a hierarchy which is very defined. So do you have to teach people to say hello? Well, apparently you do. Another trend we see is that we see operations as the main champion for the daily approach. The reaction we get from HR is usually a bit more hesitant, let's put it. So, which brings us to what is HR's role in engagement. We see it as a great workplace is everyone's job. So if a manager is starting with any type of HR tech or whatever type of system he or she is doing, what can you as HR do to help and facilitate the process? So when you sit down to analyze whatever result or whatever survey it may be, what are the next steps that you take from there? So what small stuff and small steps can you take? I got a question from a German manager a while ago that said he was having a problem with his HR because he said they really prefer the yearly feedback session as opposed to the daily feedback session. He's an agile manager and he wanted to incorporate it in the whole company and he was getting pushback. I told him to come here. And I told him about how other true agile HR are doing it. This is an example of a company where HR is bringing agile into the whole company, not just in their software teams. They're in finance, leadership, HR, everything is agile. So what she does is, her team, they do sprints. So she does sprints. So every 3 weeks, she does a sprint. So she will ask people, come up with solutions and come up with whatever you want to improve. She has a big whiteboard where she gets people to put the stuff that they want to improve, and then she gets them to vote. Okay, what do you think I should be working on the next 3 weeks? Hands up, everyone that thinks that. So this is one example of how you can be more hands-on. And also, if you have in your company, for example, where the employee morale is low, and you want to help your leader, something we see a lot as well is that a lot of people wait for the big program. So maybe it's a leadership course that you want to give because you know that your employee retention is low in one department, for example. And the course is probably going to be effective, but until it happens, what can you do now? Because meanwhile, people are still going to be upset by the things that you're giving feedback to, which isn't solved. I wanted to talk about the business impact as well. And I know we have little time, so I'm trying to speed up.
3 minutes.
Okay. We see a lot of people that are connecting the employee morale with their financial results. And they put it in their annual results to also elevate it and give it a high status. So they also say that it makes it, you can have a completely different conversation with your CFO when you can put a euro sign to your activities of what it is that you're doing. Because you could also say that all these things that we've seen with the waffles, etc., why do them? Well, if you have a positive working atmosphere, people will be more productive. And when people are more productive, you will make more money. So this is the recipe that Avitech are using for their Waffle Fridays. If this activity gives you 10% higher employee morale, how much does it cost to do this? Your flour, sugar, etc. And how much does it cost you to lose an employee? How much does it cost you to lose productivity? Because the time it will take you to prepare the waffles, eat them, etc., you'll win that back in productivity. And it's also a good example of what you can do with very low external budget. Another KPI is related to retention. We have a company in Mexico where they have a lot of migrant workers. In this case, the factory manager, when talking to them, realized that they only eat once a day because they wanted to save money for their family. So of course that's going to impact other KPIs. So what he did was to show that he cared. He changed the canteen and he said, okay, well, now you can eat for a symbolic figure 3 times a day. When I spoke retention and KPIs with him, he said, the best way that I measure it is that in our local area, we have people physically knocking on our door saying they want to come and work here because our workers have been telling their friends and family about how nice they like it and how good they think it is to work here. So if you're in recruiting, that's the kind of situation that you want to have. Oh, they also have a mood KPI of 92%, which is very, very high. This is a company where they measured, for 2 years, they measured employee morale and productivity daily. They also implemented SAP. So they know how much activity costs, and they also know the financial impact. So what the HR director was saying was that, well, implementing SAP had a certain impact on our employee morale. They could see the impact on the very first day they announced it. They could see the impact the day they had their first training session, the second training session, and then the pretty red week when they actually implemented it because there were a couple of things they hadn't taken into account. So during their implementation of the SAP, they were adjusting their course based on how their employees were feeling. So do we need more staff? Do we need more productivity? All of this is what they sit down with management to go through together and see, are we pushing people too hard? And he's also saying what surprised us most was just how parallel the curves were between productivity and employee morale. And of course, you can correlate anything. You can correlate your sales, your quality, projects, products, whatever it may be. And then you can monetize as well the points that you're going up and down. Because the thing is, when you introduce a big project like SAP, you do it because you want a big impact, you want the financial reward, but if it means that it's taken a big toll on your people, then you're missing out on productivity. There's also a company where they validate if changing a manager was the right decision. There's a company where they fire people and they get a positive response. Maybe those are the people that are just oozing out bad energy at work. I'm not saying you should go and fire people. And the last thing I also wanted to talk about is the aspect of self-reflection. So we put 2 buttons by design. The reason is that we want people to think about their workday. So if you put a middle option, how was your day? Yeah, it was okay. But if you really have to think about your workday, what made it good, what made it bad? Because the problem is that a lot of people don't think about their workdays. So if you press red on Friday, for example, what can you do on Monday? Who do you need to talk to? What needs to change for you to have better days at work? And the same thing for all your colleagues. And so the summary is kind of that a lot of the things that can be done in the workplace start with small things. And a lot of those small things can be done by anyone. Like I said, most of our users aren't HR. So who in your organization can help you? Because employee morale and company culture, well, it's not a self-playing piano. And when we interviewed the people, when we came up with the Celpax, we interviewed 100 people. And they said stuff like, well, employee engagement isn't that hard, which for us was, oh, okay. And one woman said, well, you just need to put it in your agenda and do small things every day. So I would like to say one last thing before we go for lunch, which is, you know, on Monday afternoon, when it's time to go home and you get your jacket, you get your bag, etc., and you walk towards the exit door, then really think about what did you like about your workday? What would have made you press green, or what would have made you press red? And then try to fix it. So you measure, talk, improve, and repeat, and get more people to join your journey. So that's kind of it for me. Yeah. Was it 30 minutes?
Kleines Device, große Wirkung aus meiner Sicht. Gibt es eine Frage?
Just one question. You talk a lot about how the HR department can talk and get active. Is there like in enabling employees to also become more, empowered? Do you also have a feedback kind of ideas as well, so the employees themselves can act upon their bad mood?
Our data shows that the companies that have the highest mood KPIs and where the quickest bounce back after a crisis, for example, is where conversations are happening. So that's also why we see HR as an enabler. So if you sit down with the manager, for example, and have the conversation of, okay, let's look at your number. What do you plan for next week? What actions will you be taking? That's the manager down approach. What we see happening is also that we have employees that are signing up for the device because they want to improve things. So then you can also say, okay, well, which people are interested in the organization to have a bit more active role? Because a lot of people also, they assign like these employees that are supposed to be the champions, but there could also be other people out there. So we see the conversations as a good thing. So it's not a manager thing, because this starts in the cafeteria. When people talk about work, do people just sit there and complain? Do they whine? So we also know that the conversations are happening between the employees, and some people also use the vocabulary of I had a green day or I had a red day. But the problem is where the managers aren't really talking, because you as an employee can want to have all these real, authentic conversations, but the question is if your manager is interested in it, and that's where we see that HR has a very interesting role. How can HR help managers have these conversations?
Many thanks.